Hello and welcome back to the KCC channel. I'm Rob and I hope you're having a wonderful day today. Today, we're jumping into some malicious compliance. Our first story today comes to us from Adam Jadam. Little to no regret. Let's jump right in. So I was recently, about 6 months ago, hired by a big company to do IT. During one of the training sessions, we were told to do 10 to 25 tickets a day. The tickets took a minimum of 3 minutes to answer if it was an easy case, as most of us had replies written up that we used over and over. So one day, I did 31. Another day, when I was being lazy, I still did 27. Boss's supervisor was thrilled at me. One of my higher-ups was not. I was clearly making her look bad because, like I said, minimum per day was 10 and she's a skater. So she decided to spend all the free time she clearly had combing through my replies to tickets with a fine-tooth comb, tearing apart every word and reply as much as she could. 2 days after I was told my work was great, I was informed that all work had to be submitted to a higher-up and approved before being sent in. I was like, WTF? 2 days ago, you said all was well. But I just smiled, said no problem, and then was handed a printout Excel spreadsheet by a pissed lazy higher-up detailing her shredding work. 3 minutes into reading, I decided to go hunting. None of her responses were bad. All she did was reword things, some of which I didn't even write as I had used replies that my trainer had been using for years. So I had asked at some point how to know how many tickets I do, and boss's boss had sent me a link into her account, where not only could I see what cases I had done, but everyone's cases. That's when I discovered why lazy higher-up hated me. I was putting her at risk of being fired by running circles around her. So, since Lazy Worker had been there longer, of course she was listened to. After a heated senior staff meeting, boss's boss took all us newbies aside and said we all had to get our work approved by a higher-up before sending it out. Now, I had shared a lot of my shortcuts with my coworkers, so we were all doing more work than our superiors got done. That must mean we're badly trained, right? Well, let me tell you the stupidity of that instruction. You see, I worked Tier 1, so anything I didn't know, I was already asking people about, as were my coworkers down on Tier 1. But by not letting us submit anything at all, work came to a more or less standstill, with our higher-ups run ragged going back and forth, proofreading all our tickets before we could send them. This meant that they couldn't get any of their own work done until after all us temps left for the day, which meant our already painfully slow ticket response time was 10 times slower, with us noobs only able to submit 5 to 10 a day instead of the 20 to 30 we were doing just a day before the new absurd mandate. And the upper levels had no time to do tickets of their own after having to approve all of ours all day, every day. It's really hard to explain how pleasing it was to watch lazy higher-up running around, because of course, we all asked for her feedback since she clearly didn't agree with her fellow upper-tier people's emails that we had to work with. So she and she alone could truly tell us how to word things, right? After all, I had a printed Excel sheet, page after page after page, of her tearing apart the replies her coworkers at her level had been using, and all our jobs were on the line over this as we needed to show immediate improvement. This lasted a whopping 3 days before we were all fired. That's right, fired. Because if the managers had to read and approve our responses, clearly we were not cut out for the job. You told us to get them approved, remember? But honestly, I don't care. It was the most entertaining 3 days I ever spent in tech support. I do feel a little bad for lazy workers' coworkers who were also worked to the bone doing our jobs as well as theirs, but since none of them spoke in our defense, clearly, my sympathy for their plight is limited. Funnily enough, my wife and I both got fired from a call center for doing something that our boss told us to. In fact, our whole team got fired because our boss told us to do something that the company didn't like in the end. So, they fired our whole team, they fired the boss, and they fired the site director. Yeah, cleaning house. So what did we do? We got a paralegal, we went after them, and they ended up paying us severance, although they didn't take responsibility. OP, I think you could come back on them for an unlawful termination here. You seem to be in pretty much the same circumstances I was in. You were told to do something by your boss, so you did it, and they fired you for it. That's not right. Do me a quick favor, have a look down below the video. If that subscribe button's still red, it means you're not actually subscribed to the KCC channel. Please hit that subscribe button for more daily Reddit stories. Our next story today comes to us from Bodad. It's just an air filter. Just get me an air filter. Let's jump right in. I've been reading a few of these stories for a while and having a chuckle. However, one has reminded me of a buddy of mine who used to work for a popular car parts store. I'm not the best at telling this story, and I only ever witnessed it firsthand once, but here goes. He was working at the parts store one day a week on the weekend while studying at uni. At least once every other shift, he would have someone come in and ask for an air filter for their car. No details as to what make, model, year, etc. Just get me an air filter, they are all the same. So one day, he was looking through their system and had someone try this on, and it got him thinking. He found the most expensive air filter he could get his hands on. From memory, it was a Cat diesel bulldozer or something. Retail the thing was like $1,200 and stood about 1 meter tall and about 200 millimeters round, 39.4 inches tall. The thing arrived during the week and coworkers had to hide it from the branch manager as they were told of his plan. Took about a week before someone came in demanding an air filter for their car. Sure, what kind of car is it? Just get me an air filter, they are all the same. Cue malicious compliance. Bear in mind a standard bench is 0.9 meters tall. He slams the 1 meter tall filter on the desk, scans it in the system, and acts rather surprised at the cost. Sorry sir, it's a bit expensive. Retail says $1,200. Don't think I'll be able to do any discount on this one. Now, as I said, I only saw him do this once, and I don't know how he would keep a straight face, but the next words out of the customer's mouth was always, "But last time I only paid $40. His answer, "Well, this here is the best filter we got. I don't want to sell you rubbish and have you come back complaining to my boss about me not doing my job." They would always then give the details, and he would get them the filter needed. This filter was at their store for probably 2 years before the branch manager figured out they had a ridiculously priced filter that they couldn't sell for something they don't ever get asked for parts for. He found it and had it sent back. Meanwhile, at least once a week, someone working at the store would get to use the filter for some malicious compliance before the customer would give them their card details. Part of this isn't really adding up for me because I know that stores like this do an inventory probably about every 8 weeks or so. And so that thing would be sitting there through each one of these inventories. It would have to be accounted for. They would have seen it way before 2 years. So OP, I think there's a little bit of a hole there. I hate calling people out, but you gotta do it when you gotta do it. Our next story today comes to us from Cream Cheese Wonton. Ew. Get fired or go to the doctor. Let's jump right in. So I work at a minimum wage sandwich place. My probation period was 90 days. I was 8 days away from being done with the 90 days. However, today I was doing dishes and my elbow knocked over a glass, which proceeded to shatter on my foot and cut me in several places. My first instinct was to turn and grab paper towels, which then led to me also stepping on the glass shards. As I sat on the floor bleeding, crying, and picking glass out of my foot, I called my job, boss, and coworker since no one was picking up first. I sent my boss a picture of my bleeding foot with glass still in it, tip and bottom. His reply, "It doesn't look that bad." I told him, "I'm bleeding and in pain. I'm going to the doctor." He then called me and said, "Look, you've been calling out way too much, so if you don't come in, you won't have a job to come back to." I said, "Are you serious? I didn't do this on purpose." He said, "I'm not going to argue. Either come in or you don't have a job anymore." This after yesterday telling me I took too long doing my work duties, despite the fact I finished 2 hours into my 4-hour shift, and then get sent home early. Now, this was my second job, so I sent him a message. "Thank you for the opportunity of working there, but I'm going to go to the doctor and take care of myself. Wish you all the best." Cue my coworkers texting me I need to suck it up and work. They need me. I just said, "I'm sorry, but I'm not putting myself in severe pain and discomfort for a minimum wage job that doesn't care about me." For context, I have called out 4 times in the last 3 months. 1, I got exposed to COVID and had to get tested. Gave me a doctor's note. 2, was vomiting for 8 hours straight. Thought it was food poisoning, turned out to be a stomach ulcer that was about to burst. 3, mom had a seizure and I wanted to make sure she was okay and get her to the hospital. He requested I just leave her there and go to work. They let me in with her because she doesn't speak English and I translate for her, so I couldn't just leave her. 4, today, when I had to pull glass out of my foot and was bleeding on both sides. regardless of my excuses, because I was in my probation period, he could fire me for any reason or no reason at all. Luckily, I don't need that job, but I know they needed me, but I'm not going back. I would honestly go back to the job after and see if you actually get fired, because if you get fired, you might actually qualify for unemployment, but if you quit, well, that's just not gonna happen. OP did mention that they have another job though, so hopefully the other job can give them some extra hours and they can just cut out the toxic place altogether. Our next story today comes to us from I'm Your Huckleberry 84. One balloon per person, you say? Alright then, I choose this one. Let's jump right in. This happened a couple of years back on my coworker's birthday. I ran out that morning to the party store to grab a small balloon bouquet. Wasn't going for anything fancy, just one Mylar birthday balloon with 2 or 3 solid colored latex balloons to match. A fairly standard arrangement. It was a little after 10 a.m., the store had just opened, and I was the only customer in there. I walked up to the counter to order my balloons, and the woman working there asked me if I had pre-ordered. I told her I hadn't, and she informed me that she couldn't do it for me. Apparently, if I didn't pre-order, it was their store policy that they could only do 1 balloon per person per visit. I looked around. I am still the only customer in the store. Now, I would totally get why this would be something the store would have to enforce if there were other people waiting. But again, there was nobody else there. And filling up 3 to 4 regular balloons would maybe take about 2 minutes tops, and it was pretty obvious at this point that this lady was really just being lazy. I apologized and explained that I wasn't aware of their policy and would remember to call ahead in the future, but asked if she could help me out because I was trying to get them for my coworker whose birthday was that day. She answered me abruptly with a, "Sorry, store policy." I think about it for a second and tell her to hold on for a minute. If I can only get 1 balloon, I would like to pick a different one. I went back to one of the birthday party aisles and found a package for a full-bodied Mickey Mouse balloon. Now, if you've never seen one of these full-bodied character balloons, you'll know that it's made up of multiple parts: head, arms, body, legs, feet, etc. that need to be individually blown up and then assembled to create the character. This is then completed with putting weights and rollers on the feet so your balloon can walk. It is technically 1 balloon though. I went back and handed the package to the lady at the front counter, shrugged, and said, "If I only get 1 balloon, it might as well be a good one." I then proceeded to watch her struggle to figure out how to assemble it for the next 15 to 20 minutes. I can't say I've ever spent $20 on a single balloon before, but it was totally worth it to watch this woman angrily assemble my single balloon, when if she'd just done what I had originally asked for, I probably would have already been back at my office. I only wish I could have watched her watch me as I left, walking hand in hand out the door with my freshly created Mickey Mouse balloon. That would be an absolutely epic story for the birthday party later on, and telling the coworker just how they came about having a Mickey Mouse balloon. It would be a good story for the office for a long time after. There were absolutely a lot of ways this one could have gone though. You could have walked out and phone called and said, "Hey, I have an order to put in, I'll be there in 10 minutes. Or you could have bought one, left, come back, bought another one, left, come back, and bought another one. Our next story today comes to us from Brother P. You'll be calling your lawyer? Just what I want to hear. Let's jump right in. As a former school board privacy officer, I dealt with many FOI requests from the public that dealt with anything from salaries of senior employees to values of contracts awarded to emails about routine business. Occasionally, someone would submit a very complex request that would require a lot of time to complete. So it was with one parent who wanted thousands of emails, committee meeting minutes, reports, and the personal notes of a dozen different school board employees. The reason? She had requested that her children's bus stop move from the entrance to the cul-de-sac she lived on to right in front of her house. While the difference was only about 100 meters, 109 yards, the request was denied because the circle at the end of the cul-de-sac was too small for the bus to turn around. After working on the request for more than a month, she grew impatient and demanded to know what was taking so long. I tried to explain I was a one-man operation, but she started making accusations that I was part of a conspiracy against her. She demanded that I produce all the records immediately or I will contact my lawyer. Now, I'm smart enough to know that anyone who says, "I will contact my lawyer," doesn't have one. especially not one who specializes in freedom of information requests. But playing along, I said, "Oh, we don't want it to come to that. I'll finish this today," and hung up. So I did. The legislation requires that we charge $7.50 per 15 minutes of search time for records, plus $7.50 per 15 minutes of preparation time, redacting personal information, eliminating non-responsive info, etc., plus other incidental costs, copying, printing, etc. Because I had to have ICT help with the emails and computer records, the charges added up rapidly. I called her back the next day and told her the first batch of records would be ready by the end of the week. Then I asked how she'd like to pay the cost. "The cost?" she said. "What cost? How much?" $4,870, I said. "As I'm sure your lawyer will explain, 50% is payable up front before we proceed any further with the request. Then we can start on the next batch." Dead quiet on the other end of the phone. "You haven't heard the end of this. I'm calling local news," she shouted and hung up. It's now 3 years later, still waiting. I'm sure that OP has had to explain this to people in the past, that freedom of information means freedom of restraint on access, not free of cost to access. I would have just sent her a bill that says payable now at the top with a penalty for late payment, like standard. Check out all 5 OPs linked in the description down below. I thank you for watching. I hope you have a wonderful day, and we'll see you tomorrow.